Welcome into Soccer Science on the NSCAA. I'm Wolfgang Golke alongside Professor Jay Williams here on the campus of Virginia Tech. We have a great episode lined up for you guys today as we discuss what's the most winning color, how to avoid and prevent concussions, and how to score goals like Cristiano Ronaldo. But first, we're talking about the third team on the pitch, and that's the referees. Controversial calls happen frequently, and with regular season play wrapping up, the decisions made by the man in the middle carry more weight and scrutiny than ever before. MLS play has already hit the quarter mark, and Toronto FC is on the outside of the playoffs, looking in, standing at 7th in the Eastern Conference. The Reds recently dropped their fourth game and third straight on the season last Saturday 2-1 to the New England Revolution. After the game, Toronto FC head coach Ryan Nelson questioned the call made by Mark Geiger, who forced the retake of a Revolution corner kick after Toronto FC had already cleared the first corner attempt. Nelson stated, quote, "It was a retake and corner kick which I've never seen in my life," end quote. Tied at 1-1 in the 82nd minute, TFC conceded a handball penalty in the box after the second corner attempt. Revolution converted the penalty, giving New England the lead, and eventually the full 3 points. Now, Jay, this isn't the first or the last time we'll see a controversial call made in a soccer game, and what's interesting, though, is that these types of things tend to happen towards the end of games at a point where fatigue starts to set in not only for the players, but also for the referees. So, Jay, in this instance, the call happened after over 80 minutes of play. How much of a factor could that play into referee decision-making?
Wolfgang, there's no doubt that fatigue can affect referees towards the end of the match and can affect the way they call the game. One of the underappreciated aspects of soccer is exactly how much work referees do. During the course of a match, a center referee can run about as much as a center midfielder. They may cover anywhere from 6 to 8 miles per match. So the fact that they may be experiencing fatigue and that in turn affects calls, that's not surprising that can happen.
Segueing into our next point on referees has to do with where they are on the field, particularly their perspective on where attackers are coming in from either the left side or the right side. Now, in Western cultures, left is seen as sinister, whereas right is seen as more spiritual. These cultures read and write from left to right as well. And Jay, you've done research and studied this particular topic. Is there data out there to suggest that this leftward bias exists in soccer as well?
Actually, Wolfgang, there is. There was a study done a few years ago where they asked referees to view slide tackles that came from the right to the left and tackles that came from the left to the right. When they analyzed the calls that were made, referees tended to call fouls at about a 5% greater rate when they came from the right as opposed to they came from the left. This idea that right to left movement is viewed more sinister versus left to right has been known for years. In fact, the theater takes advantage of that. Villains and bad guys tend to enter from the right and move to the left. The good guys tend to enter the left and move to the right. So the idea that referees, their perception is right to left is viewed as more harmful, more dangerous, versus left to right, can certainly influence their calls.
And you just said it happens 5% more often when a player attacks coming from the right side to the left as opposed to the left side to the right side.
Correct.
Moving on from how viewing direction might influence the game, we turn to how seeing certain colors may correlate with winning. And looking at the English Premier League standings, after 37 weeks, Liverpool sits atop at number 1 with 81 points. Liverpool happens to don red at home, and what hasn't been working out for Toronto FC the past few weeks, generally wearing red does show a correlation with winning, does it not, Jay?
Correct, Wolfgang. There was a study that looked at over 50 years of English Premier League soccer, and what they found out is teams that wore red at home won about 54% of the matches. Blue, less than that, white a little bit less, and teams that wore yellow actually won less than half their matches. So there is evidence that wearing red does seem to affect the outcome of the game.
Now, could this also be attributed to the fact that maybe some teams that are better wear red as opposed to other teams that are not?
It could be. The better teams do wear red. But if we look at Olympic sports such as wrestling and boxing, those competitors are randomly assigned a red or a blue singlet. And if you look at the results, the won-loss records, the individual that wears red tends to win more often than the individual that wears blue. So there is something about red being more aggressive and blue being a little bit more passive that may contribute to the red teams winning more than the other colors.
From seeing red to seeing stars, we go to a growing issue not only in football, but also in football, and that is the number of growing concussions in the sport. According to a 2012 study published by the American Sports Journal of Medicine Preview, women's soccer ranks second only to football in the number of reported concussions. Now, Jay, one of the fallacies on the cause of concussions in soccer is due to the heading the ball, but really that just isn't the case, is it?
Correct. Wolfgang, what we know is that what we consider purposeful heading really contributes very little to the concussions that occur with soccer. Most concussions occur because of either head-to-head contact or elbow-to-head or the player falling down, the head striking the ground. So there's very little evidence that heading the ball actually does any kind of harm to the head.
And the discussion is we want to prevent head injuries. And just recently in the 2013 Youth Sports Safety Summit, Don Comstock found athletes that were diagnosed with concussions were associated with less overall neck size and strength opposed to athletes who were not diagnosed. Now, Jay, how exactly does neck size and strength factor into head injuries?
There's a number of trainers that now think that neck strength may be one of the biggest risk factors with concussions. What happens with a concussion is the head accelerates quickly one direction or the other, or it stops very quickly when it hits the ground. So if we can strengthen the muscles that stabilize the head, and that is the neck muscles, we can prevent the head from accelerating as much when a blow is received to the head. So if we can slow that acceleration down, stabilize the head, we may be able to reduce the risk of head injury.
So essentially tightening that neck muscle can reduce that whiplash effect, which really causes the injury.
Right. We instruct players to tighten their neck before they head the ball, so the same idea goes. If we can hold the head steady, a blow is received to the head, it moves less, and we may reduce the chance of sustaining a concussion.
Well, speaking of concussions, Valencia was concussed last week by Real Madrid forward Cristiano Ronaldo. Ronaldo is one of the best in the world when it comes to soccer, and he did something last week that maybe only he could. Down 1-2 in stoppage time, Ronaldo scored the tying 2-2 goal against Valencia by redirecting a cross into the box off the back of his heel. Now, he made it look quite easy, Jay, but is what Ronaldo did Sunday a product of his overall talent, his skill, or maybe a combination of the two?
There's no doubt Ronaldo's an incredibly talented individual. He has a vast array of genetic gifts that makes him the player he is today. So we know that genetics plays an important role in athletic performance. If we look at horse racing, breeding is essential to performance. If we look at families, the Williams sisters, for example, in tennis, if we look at soccer, Cesare and Paolo Maldini as an example of a father and son. So we know genetics is important. But most experts will tell you it's about a 50-50 mix, depending on the sport, of genetics versus training. So an athlete who has the genetic potential to be successful has to couple that with training. Otherwise, he's not going to achieve the level of play that he might.
All right, so choose your parents wisely and make sure you practice and train every day to improve your play in
Correct.
soccer. Well, that's going to do it here from Blacksburg. For Professor Jay Williams, I'm Wolfgang Golke. Thanks for watching. We'll talk to you next time on Soccer Science right here on the NSCAA.